Welcome to Pep Talks with Eric, the podcast where self-work becomes system work. I'm your host, Eric Ayers, creator and author of SimRx, Transforming Healthcare, Leadership, and Culture by Design. This show is your space to shift perspectives, ignite action, and remember who you are and who we are in the process. Every week, we spark transformation, from burnout to breakthrough, from surviving to designing. You'll hear real stories, real tools, and real humans doing real work. So let's shift, let's build, and let's spark what's next together. I'll see you inside. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Pep Talks. I'm your host, Eric, and this show is here to create positive feedback loops, to shift out of our negative feedback loops and provide positive ones that guide and nourish our lives. Create sparks of transformation. Ultimately, that's what we're doing here. And today's guest, Amanda Younts, embodies all of that and more. So she's a creative soul, a courageous leader, and the voice behind Midlife Catalyst, a podcast that speaks right to the heart of reinvention. I first connected with her not too long back, and our conversation, the moment we spoke, I was like, okay, she needs to be on this show. And just her story is one of resilience, creativity, and radical presence, which is embodied in this podcast, a true shift from performance to purpose. So let's get into it. Amanda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I love everything you embody and everything this show. It speaks right to my heart. So,
well, I appreciate that. And I know, so you spent 22 years in education, and right away when we started chatting, that was a commonality between the two of us. So mine was healthcare and healthcare education. Yours is education, but still the same idea of doing the same thing, expecting the same thing. So how do we change in a system that is creating, expectations that are the same instead of looking outside the box? So that was the first thing that I was like, all right, we need to dive into this a little bit deeper. So if you don't mind, let's start back at the beginning. I know a little bit about how you arrived where you are, but I would love for the listeners to know, and what was life like before the midlife catalyst moment?
my goodness. So as far as public education went, I came from a lineage of educators. So I knew it wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do. Like, it was not that burning passion, but it was what I knew how to do. And I was good at it, right?
Yeah.
So, but I knew deep down that it was never the thing, because I was never happy or satisfied. I enjoyed my time, loved obviously working with kids and teachers, but I kept climbing and thinking, I'll hit this position and I'll be fine and I'll stop. And kept going and kept going. And ultimately it was kind of like, well, there's nowhere else to go. There's nowhere else to go in this profession. And I still have not felt that true fulfillment to where I'm not, like you said, constantly performing, constantly battling up against that frustration of, man, this system is never going to change no matter how high I go, where I am, what role I'm in. I can't make the change that I see I want to do. And through all of this, I was about 2017 was really looking at getting out. Like, this is the time. And December, right into the new year of 2018, my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. My mom was not doing well. I knew she had something going on as well, but she kind of stepped back to take care of my dad. So 2018, I lost him. 2019, I lost my mom. And in the spring of 2020, after I kind of came out of that grief fog of just survival, when everyone else was shutting down in the world, I started opening up to, knowing I've written 2 obituaries in 2 years, and I've sat on deathbeds where my parents were like, we have no regrets. We lived the life we wanted. We're good. And I knew I could not say that. And so for me, transforming during that time of 2020, when I really had the time and the space to get really clear, that I needed to start following more my gut and my purpose over my head and what I thought I should do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't obviously that was 2020, and here we are 2025, and I didn't leave education until a year ago. So it took, some planning and just kind of figuring things out and working through things. But I absolutely do not regret at all leaving the field.
All right, I want to highlight a few things because this is what I find amazing, and I find it to be true in a lot of people's stories, right? It's very relatable, and each story is it's vastly different, but the core concepts, that's what intrigues me. I'm a believer and a lover of disruption, and I hate it when it's going on, but learning to embrace it and coming out the other side as a better person for that disruption speaks volumes to when we can hone into this. So you had multiple disruptions, you know, your parents, and then it's almost like that disruption allowed you to blossom when everyone else went in. So it was the timing. I mean, I can't imagine going through that. That's awful in terms of the human experience, the preparation and the gift that they left you to say, I'm fulfilled. And you're like, wait a minute, I'm not. So what do I do now to not, as Wayne Dyer would say, I don't want to get to my deathbed and still have music inside of me. So
Right.
how do I share my music and how do I start doing it now? And and then the world disruptor of COVID comes in and shifts everyone's modality, and you're like in a different realm because now you're opening up when everyone else is going in, and you're like, this is interesting. And how many times do we find ourselves in not fitting in, but knowing because something gave us permission to take a step forward? And it's almost like those around you may not have gotten that permission, but the disruption in your life was like, I permit you to take a step forward. And there's beauty in that empowerment. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to highlight that it's difficult. I'm sure that was like one of the hardest steps,
Right.
but from hearing you talk, it got you through the next 3 or 4 years before you build up until the pivot step of no, I'm bouncing out of here and going somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Yes. And what you said about embracing disruption, so many people around me were like, it's okay to fall apart. Like they were waiting on a breakdown, and I
Yeah.
instead had a breakthrough. I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, I had some struggles,
Right.
but I was like, no, I'm breaking through to finding, that fulfillment and chasing my dreams. And then for me, speaking and sharing these stories is a hope that other people don't necessarily have to go through such traumatic, terrible experiences to make those shifts and make
Right.
those moves. Of if someone can learn from my grief and story, that's why I share it.
Yeah, and that's human connection at its core. That's the Ubuntu I am because we are. Um, but we all know that a lived experience and a a personal experience is the best education tool that we possibly can get. Now, when we can start learning from others, that's where we're like true masters of our own destiny. And it's difficult. But I love that energy behind there. And I love the concept of breakdown versus breakthrough because both of them, this everyone listen, this is amazing. This was an aha moment for me just now is both of them break. You were breaking the constructs of who you are in both situations. One is disempowering and one is empowering. One is, so in the book Power versus Force, one of them is power. The breakthrough gives you power to move forward, and the breakdown is the force, because you're forcing yourself through this change and you're losing yourself in the process. That's huge. Thank you for sharing that with me. That was my knowledge nugget that I'm taking away from this and being like, okay, I can build on this.
Definitely. Yes.
So we talked about, and this was another aha moment in our conversation, was the illusion of performance over being creative. So let's talk about performance. And it's because it's something that a lot of us get trapped in, right? Especially in this constructs of a matrix created, I'll call it business, but corporation, organization. So the education model, the healthcare model, all of these models, the matrix model of these, we get caught in this performance. So speak to me about, and to us about, the performance and the highlight that you recognized.
Oh, well, and I think it's so hard because you're so busy just going to the next thing, that I know I was moving on autopilot and was truly not present for much of anything. And it was, what's the next? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it was performing, be it for other people, for political aspect, for social media aspect, but it was never that intrinsic, I'm here because this lights me up. I was getting joy from lighting other people up. And I kept trying, that setting yourself on fire of neglecting myself, which it's
Yeah.
kind of where the burnout comes from. I was totally neglecting myself, because if I can just fix this problem, fix this person, fix this situation, eventually kind of the same thing, perform, perform, perform. So everyone else is happy, and yet I'm not happy.
Right.
And they were. And so then you kind of have this, people are shocked to learn, that you're
Yeah.
dissatisfied. And it really goes into that, because everyone works in their own framework. That is why you have to focus on you front and center. You have to put your wellness, your health and well-being in front of everyone else. And that comes off as a servant leader, as, not being of service, and that you are supposed to put others first, but you're not. I know I am not a good leader, and I'm not a good person to be around if I'm not prioritizing my needs, because then I'm nicer, kinder, better to other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But that got lost in the performance, right?
Yes.
Kind of step out and go, who am I? Why? All the way down from your appearance to things you say to places you go, that you're like, this is not even close to who I am in the core.
What a brilliant insight, because I think it's overlooked. I think dopamine plays a huge part in our creating negative feedback loops, because we're seeking that next dopamine hit, whether we consciously know it or not. And something that you said, it's so pivotal, because if we are chasing our performance, chances are the passion is not there. Because if the passion is there and we're doing something we love, the performance is going to match, and it's going to be organic, and we're going to feel like we're flowing into this. But if we're chasing performance and we need to create these check boxes of, am I getting there? Am I getting there? Then we're seeking something outside of who we are. And I'm saying this from experience. I did the exact same thing. It's like, what's the highest level of nurse I can be within there? And then once you get there, then what? Because it's lonely when you get there and you're like, all right, now how am I going to get this next dopamine? And because it's not going to be found here, it's going to be found somewhere else. And the whole time, to your point, I'm on fire because that's what I've done. And I've helped everyone else. I've done everything, but have lacked the core elements of who I am. Brilliant concept.
And I wonder, have you found it's taken me, gosh, probably up until like February to re-regulate my system when you talk about those dopamine hits, because, my phone would start from 5 a.m. to midnight and all the fires and all the emergencies. And so to truly come out of that and kind of restabilize my nervous system and as a human of how I respond and show up in the world, it took a while to reset that and
Absolutely.
regulate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm speaking for me, really quick to fall back onto previous habits and behaviors because it's great when you're focused on something, but 5% of our brain we have the ability to focus. The other 95% is habitual. So changing behaviors is really hard because our habitual mind's like, no, no, no. I've gotten you here. You're 45. I've gotten you to 45 by going through these habits and these cycles. Let's just go to that. It's easier. So when you have that aha moment, you're like, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to do this. It seems easy for a couple of days. You're like, oh, I'm regulating this dopamine. And then all of a sudden you start flowing into work and patterns. And all of a sudden the habitual mind comes in and you're like, oh, dang it. I'm right back to where I was or going down this rabbit hole. So we talk. I'm glad this is coming up because we talk like, oh, this is how you do it. It's this 5-step process. You do this, and this. In a couple of weeks, you're good. But no, this is an ever evolving thing that I don't think we ever get to the very end because the deeper we go, the more we're like, oh, okay, I could shift this habit. I could shift this habit. And then it's like the layer after layer after layer. So to answer your question, yes, the nervous system reset, I think it's an ongoing, at least for me, it is.
Same, because I just traded one profession because then I'm like editing podcasts till like 2 in the morning, right?
Right.
I'm still like and again, why? I wasn't getting joy. It was for performance because
Right.
we're looking at, I have to have this much engagement and this many followers rather
Yeah.
than, no, your purpose here is to share stories and make that human connection. So starting to kind of the awareness of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything starts with awareness. And um, something really interesting about awareness, a lot of us will be aware of something and all of a sudden have a negative emotion towards it because we're like, oh man, I've been doing this. No, no, no. Actually, like this is amazing because now now your 5% focused mind can do something about it. Now you can start. Before you were blinded by it and you were just walking through it. Now you have a mirror that shows you and you're like, oh, now I can actually change. So celebrate those wins instead of degrading or like belittling yourself because I mean, perfection is a thief of joy. So recognize these as, oh, cool. I'm changing. I'm shifting.
Yes. And then your priorities shift. And then kind of that, oh, I am finding joy here.
Yes. And then tomorrow you get to practice it.
Yes.
and you continue, but eventually those loops are cut off and we create new loops. And then I think within those new positive feedback loops, it gives us the ability to then start looking to the next thing, which it's interesting. When we chatted before, we talked about the perfection trap on performance, but then we also talked about the feeling and we've both heard it, we've probably both said it many times of like, I'm not creative. And since it seems to go into creativity being art. So talk a little bit, share a little bit about that creative trap that plays into this performance.
I am a huge journaler. I do morning pages. And so for me, and this is crazy, at like 47, it was at one of those aha moments as I'm trying to decide if I'm working on a memoir and I'm deep in writing, but my, that perfectionism brain, that comparison to other people that have already published 7 books, all of these things are taking over because I want it immediately as opposed to the struggle. But we've got to struggle a little. But as I'm going through this process this year, and I'm like, I'm not a creative, I'm just a writer, those kind of inner beliefs and that inner critic that's rolling through in my morning pages, I'm like, oh, this goes all the way back to middle school trauma, which then it kind of placed, oh, this was why middle school was your favorite, education wise and working.
Yeah.
Because that was the place where it all went down for me. I had been creative through dance and other things, and all of that got stopped in middle school. And I was, didn't fit the mold, appearance wise, weight wise, which, cycled into all sorts of problems through life.
Right.
And got shifted to athletics. And so then it was, no, you have which is great, serve me, right? But it also served me in accolades, performance, high achieving, grades, structure,
Right.
discipline, no room for that creative side. And so as I'm transitioning this year, I'm like, this is where it comes from. Why can't I go back to those years as a child? Why can't we all go back to when it didn't matter if your art was good or if you could perform, you still went outside and put on a production for your neighborhood, right? Or did all of these things to explore and be creative and play. And there was no penalty.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow the older we got, it was like, no. And as someone in education, that's hard because I saw it. You shut kids off and turn them off because they can't meet a certain grade or a certain goal or a certain time. So then you totally shut that drive down and they just stop doing those things when we really all just need to go out and play and let loose, stop being so structured and worried about getting the gold star and medal for it. What brings us joy.
Yes, I love that because like the grading system on this, grading me on my creativity, but it's not my creativity, it's the constraints of your creativity that you're telling me to color in, right? I'm one that colors outside the line. So when you confine me to this space, it's not going to be my imagination. It's not going to be my creativity, but we can go back from, even before Napoleon Hill and his 1935 book, Think and Grow Rich, all the way through all of the people who talk about success and successful people always illustrate that imagination is our greatest asset. Starting with Einstein, I'm pointing Einstein behind me here because he even said imagination is greater than knowledge, right? Because it's not confined to the constructs of the world. We think it and then we can actually create it. And one thing that I love is the idea that art isn't just drawing. It's not just painting. Art is what we do and the passion behind it. It changes someone else's view on whatever that is. And there's many amazing business leaders, and that's their art, right? Because the human connection is at its core. And that's what, to me, art is. But to your point, how do we get back to this toddler approach of allowing our imagination to lead? Because if we're focusing on performance, we are not imagining a greater life. We are imagining the next raise, the next tick, the next whatever it is I'm doing for something else outside of me. And that's huge. And that's hard to wrap our heads around and accept. And that's a pivotal turning point, I think.
It's huge. And it's being okay with the messy. And I think where I, again, have to catch myself is not so much me that I'm fine with it. It's other people's expectations. Because when you've come from high performing this role, people are expecting you to step right back into that and do something, great. And it's like, well, I am doing something that's great to me. It doesn't have to have CEO behind it or, this 6 figures or whatever it is. I am being the CEO of my life and living it where I feel that purpose and connection. But it's hard because those voices creep in of,
Yeah.
well, you should be doing this. I didn't ask for your opinion, but then
Exactly. Unrealistic expectations of others, which interesting enough becomes disguised as our voice as we get older, right? And then that is huge, is recognizing, wait a minute, that's not me. That's a voice that I took on in someone else's truth that I took on as mine. But Dr. Joe Dispenza says something cool because he says that, just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. Right. And it's all about that, that biology of belief, of our beliefs are created in, everyone we interact with. So what is true to us? And that's interesting. So this segues perfect into this midlife
yes.
catalyst, right? So when we get to that point where we're like, oh, like I've lived this long with someone else's purpose and performance, like what then? How do we reimagine the next phase? And honestly, like how do we give ourselves permission to move forward?
If I had all the answers to this. And I will say this because I do get this frequently in work and coaching that I do, in that I didn't have a partner or kids. I didn't have anyone else to answer to. So I had that personal freedom to go, well, it doesn't impact this catalyst, not a crisis, which, the others see at that point. It doesn't impact anyone else but me. And so I know and I see and I work with people that it's always in the back of their mind, but I've got kids, I've got this, I've got that. But flipping that narrative of don't you want your kids to not get to this point in life and feel the same way you do? Because I feel like the term midlife crisis has been around for so long because my generation stayed stuck in, we work till retirement, we do this, we do that. And so as a whole of a generation to be able to change that narrative and change that view for younger generations of you can change course. You don't have to wait till your 40s. Like if it's there, let's follow that purpose. Not, oh, I saw my mom, stay in something that made her miserable or stay, and I hear that a lot from people my age again of, well, this is what's I saw done. And it's like, but you also saw the other side that they weren't happy or this or that. So let's change what that looks like for your kids or your partner, or even the people you work with who don't have the strength or know that there's something else out there. Just, again, we're kind of on that treadmill and we're not pushing the pause button. We're just going with it.
Right. So ultimately it comes down to what limits us in everything is fear of something. And you brilliantly stated that in terms of those saying, but I have kids, but I have a spouse, but I have this, I have that. And it should be, oh, I need to do this because I have kids, because I have a spouse, because I have other things, because the understanding of Ubuntu is I am because we are, and everything I do affects everyone around me, and everything people do around me affects me. And this is This is how humans connect and how we interact. And especially kids, they're going to do, they're going to be more likely to do something that they see a parent or guardian or an adult do something as opposed to being told, because the mirror neurons just instinctively tell them this is the way I'm supposed to be acting, which could be, you know, positive or negative, depending on, how we look at it, or higher energy, lower energy, whatever we want to say to this. So yes. And here's the key. When we recognize this midlife catalyst, which I'm going to call it that, I like that. It's has a better ring to it than crisis, because crisis has limited options and we're stuck in fight or flight. Catalyst is like, I have all the power in the world. Which way do we want to go? Right? Where do we want to fly? Um, when we get to there, as we mentioned earlier, instead of seeing it as a life half lived, so to speak, we're like, thank God I caught this before 40 years from now. And cool, what do I do now? And asking the question, asking yourself question, what do I do? What do I want to do? Where do we go? And a crucial conversation with yourself. We'll put it that way.
And I am so much better at identifying what I don't want, what the not this is, over the clarity of what it is and where I want to go. But
Yeah.
again, it goes back to fear. It's
Yes.
having, everything I have gotten through is taking a step, taking action. Whether it works or not, at least I know.
Yeah.
Take action rather than circling in the head of, contemplating, do something.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so aligned with that modality. So like in my human design, I'm a 1-3, which means I have to gather the knowledge and I have to try it. And I have to try, fail, try, succeed. Oh, cool. That's how you do it, right? It's Thomas Edison. And likewise, I think that is characteristic of that profile, is understanding the things not to do, because that is vastly available to us. And we're like, yeah, I know this doesn't work. So, all right. And it's almost narrowing it down, the 10,000 ways to create this light bulb. And it's like, I know, the 9,990, I got about 10 more options to go through, and let's try it out. And it may be amazing, but if it's not, at least I know that's not the direction I'm going. And each time it doesn't work, we're standing on an elevated platform of where we can go. And that's the mindset shift in me, that I think produces the momentum that we need, and that continued permission to keep going.
Absolutely. And it kind of Daniel Pink wrote about power of regret. I have no regrets on anything I've done, like any job, any place I've moved.
Yeah.
It's the inaction, the thing you didn't do, that sticks in there. So you're really kind of studying yourself and charting your course of.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Which could lead into hours of of conversation, because ultimately, when I sit back and I think of midlife catalysts, it's almost like the first half of my life was spent learning from others. And then you reach an inflection point of, I think it's time to go within. And it's freaking weird at first, because you're like, how do you do this? And I'm a person who wants to know but when you surrender, it kind of takes care of itself.
Yes. That power of surrender. Hard for some of us control freaks, but a huge.
And it's interesting. So the power of surrender. So once you surrender, there's power that comes, and the power is ultimately, I'm not having to use my own energy. I'm not expending my energy to put out other people's fires, but instead I'm generating power And I'm leaving this with a better understanding, clear purpose, and the ability to help others. And it's a total shift because you're like, now I have the energy to do this instead of running around checking boxes and then being like, oh, cool, I did that. I'm going to wake up and do it again tomorrow. But now it's like, what does tomorrow bring?
Right.
Which is totally different.
So different.
So
Exciting.
yeah, there's so many questions I would like to ask, but I love that transformation from, not self to true self, right? And it's a journey, like we said earlier, it's a continuous journey. So on this journey, what are some practices, what are some tools that you can offer people to be like, hey, you can start now. This isn't a intangible thing that only certain people can, like spiritually renowned people or highly educated people. Like, it doesn't matter. Everyone can start now. What are some tools or some suggestions that you can provide that can get people started today?
I always say start small, do it well. I'm a huge journaler. I'm a huge morning pages person. But again, other people hear that and they think I'm not a writer, those
Yeah.
kind of things. That journaling can be art. It doesn't have to be just be pen to paper writing out sentences. So, but you've got to get that brain dump, that stream of consciousness down. So you start, for me, then I always go back, which at times can be painful, but I start to see those patterns within my thinking and my writing and what keeps those recurring themes that keep coming up. And truly drilling down to core values of who am I, not my work's core values, not a partner's core values. What are mine? And what does that look like lived out in my world? And so I start to construct, okay, I have to walk because that's where I do my best thinking, getting outdoors. But that's not necessarily the place or space for everyone else. You just have to know, where do you do your best thinking and schedule that time to go and give yourself that clarity. And I would also say, if you're planning on making a career switch, it's to start saving money. I mean, it's that. But I made some different switches of, well, I'm going to stop. I'm going to cancel this streaming, or what can you do to conserve so that it's not I have to make this, I have to go do something to make this. No, I could actually live on less if I just cut out some of the extraneous things.
Right.
Which for me, I found, I used to travel like at least once a month. I don't need to travel anymore because I don't have a life I'm trying to escape from. So it kind of was that balance out of, well, you don't need to make this much money for a travel fund when you feel at home where you are. So those little pieces. And just exploring. It can be a little scary, but I think if there's something, a hobby, a community, a supportive person is so key. And it's typically not going to be the people you think that are where you're going to find the support. But exploring that through a new group, through a new network, and honestly, just showing up and taking risks. Like, I knew nothing about podcasting or YouTube or any of this, and I just started going to free Zooms, whatever training is, whatever was out there, just to explore if it was even something I wanted to do.
Yes, because that's what we did as kids, right?
Right.
When something new was in front of us, we didn't know if we liked it or not until we tried it. And we were all in. Like, there's no hesitation. It was, I'm all in. And then you're like, oh, this is awful. But I know now I don't want to do that.
Yep.
But I do want to do this over here. And that's okay if we don't like it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's okay if we're like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk because I've heard this is great to clear my mind. And you go out and you're like, I hate these bugs. I hate sweating. It's not for you. And that's okay. You tried it.
Yes. And that's so one of my kind of beefs with, even the wellness industry of
Yeah.
this visual that everyone's wellness plan is going to look the same. And the definition of physical activity, you've got to explore what works for you. And that's whatever it is, as long as you're showing up to do it, it's much better than someone else's prescriptive plan that you don't go to. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. It being intentional about it. So when you're there, what are you expecting? What is this time for? Because if it's not intentional, your mind's going to go to the previous habitual patterns of thought processes, and you're going to be reliving yesterday or figuring out what you should have done better instead of what we can do tomorrow or the rest of today. I love that. So I
no, sorry,
Yo,
I
go
do
for
have
it.
that. Honestly, I have people do, and because this is what I did. It kind of started with writing obituaries, and it was easy to do for my parents. It's easy to do for someone else. But have you ever written your own obituary and then revisit that, right? Because we're still living.
Yep.
It's a living document. But getting that clarity on what you want those metrics to look like and those outputs to be is a very powerful exercise.
Absolutely. And I would totally agree with that because I mean that's the epitome of when I'm gone, how did others perceive me? And that can lead to fear. And if it does and you don't feel comfortable with that, there's another very parallel thing to do, and it's writing your autobiography. So a little less, you know, fear based in there, but the obituary it's like if you want to jump head first, go that route, right? If you want to take a stepping stone there, the autobiography. But I totally agree. Both of those are ways it will stop and make you think, who am I? What do I stand for? And all of a sudden, these aligned purposes or misaligned purposes are illuminated. So brilliant, brilliant advice. Last thing I want to highlight on here is you brought it up, and I want to pivot a little bit. Everyone's transformation is different, right? Everyone's wellness is different. Everyone's day to day it's different. So these one size fits all, they might fit some, but they don't fit all. Neither does transformation. Transformation looks different in everyone. And just like there's no good and bad emotion, there's no good and bad transformation, there's no good or bad way to do this. What is something that can empower people when they're in the middle of kind of the dip or like that worst aspect to where you're at the point where you're either going to break down or break through, right? What is a way that we can empower ourselves to begin the breakthrough?
Yourself and that intuition. But the biggest thing that I have learned, because I'm an internalizer and a fixer, is to open my mouth and talk to someone, not everyone. So that goes back to that, supportive one person or a supportive community and network, and just whatever it is that's weighing me down, as soon as I get it out and talk through it, it loses that power of fear. And it takes it down to either, this isn't that hard, or, you start to really solve your own problem or make your own decision once you get it out. And even beyond out, like I said, I journal a lot, but I still have to do something with that a little bit further. And as an introvert and like a very independent person, this was the biggest learning curve for me of
Yeah.
opening up.
what did you, I'm going to dive into this a little bit, if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
'cause
What,
that's not easy.
yeah, absolutely. And it's not, especially as an introvert. So yeah, I hid behind extroversion for a long time before realizing that I kind of am comfortable in both worlds, but they have to be balanced. And the extroversion allowed me to hide behind the internal conversations I needed to have with myself, right? Because it was always external stimulation. So as you walk out and you take the courageous step of taking these and putting them out into the world, into the ears of someone else, what did you see begin to happen both externally and internally?
Internally became a sense of relief, but also confidence in that nothing I ever said or put out from the people that I talked through, um, was diminished. You know, it was absolutely, and it was supportive. And then the crazy thing was when I'm opening myself, the people that come into my life that
Mm,
least expected, that other people that maybe even thought they were closer to me or we'd been friends longer, no, like for these powerful connections to come in just because I was open and willing to show up and have a conversation. And, you know, I don't recommend starting with your whole life story, but you start with little bits and then
yeah.
you, oh, yeah, I want to talk to this person more. I want to collaborate with this person on this project. But you're never going to get there keeping it inside or sitting at home. And so just having that little bit of gain, that little bit of confidence,
Yeah.
and keep propelling because I mean, I was just amazed at I put, you know, a few Substack articles out early, like September, and the feedback from that was pretty overwhelming. Oh, okay. People like this, people want to hear this, and just getting that out there. And otherwise, you know, if no one, I see it all the time. If no one responds, then okay, go try something else. But
Mhm.
the response and the connection was there. So again, it's that getting into action, doing something small
Yeah.
and trying, trial and error. Um, the more for me, kind of staying on that internal dialogue, the more for me that I spoke and spoke my truth, the more the inner critic, the negative, diminished. It got quieter and quieter,
Mm.
losing that power because it wasn't just festering inside of me.
That is so beautiful because, like, at an emotional level, so Louise Hay was one of the most influential people I listened to, read, because she helped me tap into the how to live with the feminine energy within a masculine, body. We'll say it that way. And she was always about nourishing and healing the inner child, the 5-year-old self. So as we're speaking our truth, uh, I'm seeing our 5-year-old self with a megaphone saying, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me the platform to speak who you and I truly are, because this is who we are. It was conformed out of us over whatever the case may be, out of this lived experience. But thank you for giving me the mic." And here we are. And that inner critic begins to change because now it's our self speaking through us. And the power in that is simply and profoundly just beautiful. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. I think, which I know this probably leads to another conversation up soon. is you have to be okay with ticking people off. Like, because whatever persona that mask you've worn,
Mm-hmm.
to survive and to make it, once you start shedding those things, other people get really uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know how to respond and they don't know how to interact with you. And I see it so many times, of people going back or staying where they were because of that. And at some point, I mean, I have just enough like stubborn resistance in me that I can tune it out, but
Yeah.
not everyone can or has the support to do it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. Excellent point. And the people pleasing aspect, I mean, it's very difficult because you want to make everyone happy, but at the same time, it's diminishing yourself for the expansion of others. And Ruiz in his books, Four Agreement and the Fifth Agreement, talked about this you're in people's plays, right? And you're expected to be a certain character in their play. When you shift that, they don't like it because you just disrupted their screen ride. And likewise, we do the same thing. People change in our lives and we're like, wait a minute, what the? And that's the habitual patterns that are interrupted and disrupted. And they can be viewed as, all right, let's rewrite our play, or let's remove ourselves from their play altogether because I'm not that character anymore. And if I can't be accepted as a new character, then I'm going to go be me as a character in someone else's play. So, yeah, definitely a different conversation for a different day that I think is absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. But it's okay for us to give ourselves permission to step away. Because as we're growing into who we need to be, as that 5-year-old self is beginning to remember who we are, then we can tap into that essence. And that's enough power to carry us through whatever hardship is about to come in.
Yes. Stay the course.
Stay the course. Yes, absolutely. Amanda, this has been an absolute pleasure. And, we could talk for a really long time. It feels like a very familiar bond. It feels like I've known you forever, but thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything that we didn't go over, anything you want to leave the listeners with before we sign off here?
Well, what I always leave people with, since we talked about writing your own obituary or autobiography, is AI can do a lot, but it cannot write your life story. And the better output you want, the more metrics and indicators you have to provide. So write your own narrative and be the CEO of your life.
I love that. And it's built around human connection.
Yep.
So yes, the AI can help formulate it, but the human connections are between the humans.
Yes.
I love it. Thank you for your vulnerability, for sharing your stories, for coming on here and empowering us to be our best selves.
Absolutely. I love talking about this stuff. So
likewise. And you'll have to come on again. We'll have to dive into other discussions on transformation and ways that we can empower the world, one conversation at a time.
I love it. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us. This was absolutely amazing. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, all the things. That way this can get out into the world and we can begin to change humanity one conversation at a time, one human connection at a time, and create this Ubuntu circle of people helping other people through lived experiences. And if you like this, reach out to me, reach out to Amanda. Amanda, where can they find you?
Midlifecatalyst.net is my website, which has all the places to find me from there. places to find my writing and podcasts, but you can also go to amandayounts.substack.com for my writing.
Awesome. And we will have that down below to make it way easier. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, be well, be loved. Thank you for listening to Pep Talks with Eric. If something sparked today, pass it forward. Remember to subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. Keep doing the thing. Keep showing up. You're not alone in this. And we're not whole without you. I'll see you next time.